Hi there, my name is Medhat. I'm the author of the Trusted Thriller series. This is a series that's been termed 007 on Acid with Aliens, Bond meets the X-Files, Popping Candy for the Mind, and my personal favourite, A Roller Coaster on Steroids in the Dark. So the Trusted Thriller series is a political spy sci-fi thriller. Covers 5 books, and book 2 is The Dominant. That picks up from the end of The Trusted, and they are part 1, part 2, part 3, etc. So if you suddenly go into book 3, you will need to have read books 1 and 2. It's just something to note. So what I'm going to be doing today is going to pick up chapter 1, and I'm going to have a go at reading it to you. Okay, I'm going to take my glasses off because it's easier for me to read that way. Little wrinkle I have, but there we go. So, The Dominant, chapter 1. March 23rd, 2017. Elinor lifted her head groggily. The bag covering her head had robbed her sight completely. She focused hard to look through the bag, but the tightly packed weave made it impossible. She realised uncomfortably that most of her clothes had been removed, but thankfully her underwear still remained. Cold, inspired by fear, shuddered through her. Instinctively, she tried to move, to cover herself and preserve her modesty. But as she tried to pull her hand, it was as though a knife carved through her arm, and she whimpered. Why was she in pain? Ellie moved her hips as if to turn, and that slicing feeling caught her again. She swung back and forth in waves of agony washed through her. The cutting sensation didn't appear when she didn't move. Only when she tried to use her limbs did the hurt surface. She reasoned that it had to be something they'd given her. Maybe it was something affecting her muscles, forcing agony to prevent her movement. Amongst the pain, Ellie felt metal around her wrists and ankles. Someone was set on her being as inanimate as possible. Hooded, nearly naked, and chained to a chair, overwhelming panic swept through her. Why had she been taken? Who had taken her? Would she ever see Sam again? Ellie swallowed hard, and despite her intractable situation, she forced herself to be calm. She breathed slowly and fell into the rhythm. She was a managing director of a top MTech business. She had handled presentations and negotiations with multi-billion-dollar companies. She'd never panicked once. She just got on and done what was needed. What did she rely on then? Logic? Common sense? Understanding the environment and making her play. Her thought processes had started to quell her panic. She could see, but she couldn't hear. Without sight, her listening naturally became more acute, and Ellie attempted to define her surroundings according to what she could hear. She listened, but couldn't hear anything, just the sound of her own breathing. Then suddenly, footsteps approached. The footsteps were light. If the owner was a man, he wasn't large, or else he'd been trained to push the weight off his tread like in stealth combat. The owner may even be a woman. Ellie sniffed the air for any scent, but apart from the sterile chemical smell ingrained in the hood, she smelled nothing. Her analytical mind took over, lessening her fear as she began to see through her other senses. Ellie sensed that it was a man. She couldn't figure why she thought this. Maybe the way in which the person walked. Although light, the step still sounded manly. She forgot she couldn't move and made a turn to face her captor, but that cutting, sharp feeling once again shot through her body. She inhaled sharply. The footsteps stopped. Arrival. Ellie breathed out. She tried to focus, but her mind was cloudy and heavy, like a great weight was suddenly upon it. She couldn't remember anything. She couldn't even remember her clothes being removed. That fact disturbed her. How could she not remember that? Ellie was terrified. She was more terrified than she'd ever believed she was capable of feeling. In fact, the feeling of being terrified, so often spoken about by people who had been kidnapped, was a totally physical manifestation. Ellie's brain frazzled with stimuli and backstory. What had already happened to her? What was going to happen to her? It was all conjecture. But such was its power, it could easily have sent Ellie into an internal frenzy, a hysterical madness, as she waited for her captors to commence whatever they'd intended to do. She didn't have to wait long for her captors to get to work. Sharp pain shot up her arm. A needle had been inserted. Ellie tried to turn her head but couldn't. Again she concentrated, but whatever they'd given her was too quick and too powerful. Within the hood, she had the sensations she was spinning and sliding. It was like she was very drunk. The dark seemed to accentuate the effect of what they'd given her, and Ellie felt instantly nauseous. She wanted to vomit but couldn't move. "We know you're activated, but not in the same way as the nanobomb. I wouldn't be standing here if you were loaded." Someone gripped her hood and pulled it away. A light came on, shattering her vision, bright white everywhere, burning like a laser into her eyes. She desperately wanted to shut out the painful whiteness, but she couldn't lift her arm. It was chained to the chair. "Sam knows your target, isn't he?" The words came from behind her. They sounded like the perpetrator was underwater. Ellie couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her husband was her target. What the hell was he talking about? Ellie turned, but sharp pain caught her. Whatever they'd given her was working at full strength. Any movement Ellie tried to make instantly caused her severe agony. "I said Sam knows your target. We know all about it. No point in denying it." Ellie didn't say anything. The idea that Sam was her target, it was insane. The person whose footsteps Ellie had heard eventually came into her eye line. Tall and gaunt, with blonde hair and dark grey eyes of steel, he walked softly. He had a slightly effeminate element about him, which somehow made him more sinister. He tipped his head to the side and stared at Ellie, eyeing her body slowly. He reached in and placed a finger to her cheek. Ellie trembled. "Hello, sweetie. Let's see what you're about." The interrogator walked around the chair to which Ellie was chained. Ellie tried to follow him, but a sharp, jagged, burning sensation cut like a lathe through her body. Ellie caught her breath. Her body ached. She breathed in and out in long gasps and struggled bravely to cope with the violent torment. "Oh, now I wouldn't move if I were you," the interrogator sneered as he watched Ellie. "It could get very painful if you do. Just stay still, listen to me, and answer my questions." Ellie looked in front of her and not at the interrogator. This stance annoyed him, and he pulled at her shoulder, forcing Ellie to face him. Ellie cried out as the quick twist brought a wave of agony within her muscles, and she held her breath as deep cutting hurt surged through her. "That's better. Now keep your face on me. Don't want to hurt you." Ellie stared at him. His sly, smirking mouth and steel ice cold eyes did not reflect his words. Defiance stormed within her. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing her fear. She wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of getting anything from her. Somehow, the drug they'd given her had brought clarity. A fog lifted in her mind. Fear had been her enemy, but she wasn't filled with fear now. She was filled with hate. Ellie glared at her interrogator and did not utter a word. We saw you talking in your kitchen yesterday, but no one was there, so who were you talking to? Ellie remained silent, her eyes glazed over, and she ignored her interrogator. Did you know Sam Noor was MI6 before yesterday? He asked. Are you with Al Nadir? The interviewer continued. We saw you scream. We know that was the initiation, wasn't it? The bland, emotionless voice persisted. The sleeping assassin technology, we know all about it. Ellie, ignoring all his questions, pulled frantically at her clamps. Pain cut through her mercilessly, and her beautiful face mutated into a horrible grimace. Who is Sam Noor? Who are you with? Why did you scream? Who were you talking to in your kitchen? The interrogator spoke pointedly. He wanted answers. He stood in front of Ellie, then dropped down. He grasped her legs and moved up, stroking her thighs. Ellie swallowed, but forced herself to stay strong. He nudged up so close Ellie could feel a hot breath on her stomach. She recoiled. Listen, darling. Guantanamo Bay is a heartbeat away, and we all know how they'll treat a pretty little thing like you. Ellie flinched at the words, understanding the inference, but retained her silence. The interrogator scowled, rose to his feet, and looked straight down at Ellie with impatience. I will continue to ask you questions all day and all night. I'll be replaced with another person just like me. But we're going to keep you in that chair until you speak. No toilet breaks, no food, no water, no sleep. You will speak to me, sooner or later. You'll have to. So let's avoid all this unnecessary stress. Tell me what I want to know. The interrogator walked around and then came in close to Ellie, sneering. Your friend Rickard fessed up just before he blew in Oslo. He told us everything. Keeping silent, it isn't going to help you. Ellie stared ahead and said nothing. Infuriated by Ellie's silence, the interrogator continued with the same drill over and over. Ellie knew he wanted to break her, but his monosyllabic interrogation technique was having no effect on her at all. She sat silently, every so often pulling her bonds or trying to rise from the chair, only to be dissuaded by the painful cutting sensation that ravaged her body every time she moved. Ellie was aware of time passing, but could not be sure how many hours she'd spent in the white room. Closing her eyes, she turned and tried to block out the interrogator's persistent, penetrating mantra, but his voice broke through, invading her place of solace. Oh, no, you don't. You're not gonna sleep, said the interrogator sharply, and he shook Ellie awake. As he shook her, vibrations of pain cut into her body. Her head was splitting, with a new headache, and nausea had returned full blast. Are you with? The interrogator didn't have a chance to finish his incessant questioning. Ellie interrupted, screaming, Oh, go fuck yourself! Ellie's somewhat ill-advised words of courage ejected from her shaking lips. She'd had enough of his boring, bloody voice. She felt like shit. Her head was splitting, and if she heard another word from the fucker's lips, she'd puke. Yes, it was a reckless thing to say, but sometimes Ellie spoke first and thought later. The droning, debilitating voice had pushed Ellie beyond caring, with her customary impulsiveness on overdrive. At that moment, caution was not in her vocabulary. Hearing her words, and the only words that she'd said in the entire interrogation session, the interrogator yanked her arm to the side. As he pulled, the chains dug deep into her wrist. Ellie felt a sudden stabbing. Yet another needle was driven in with naked brutality into her skin. Ellie winced and tried to look around. Her neck shook with pain by the simple movement. but she withstood it long enough to see, in her peripheral vision, the hands of the interrogator taking a blood sample. Ellie broke into a sweat. Who the hell were these people? Why did they need her blood? Somehow, she had to get out. But her body, from the head down, was completely immobile. The drugs that had caused her such agony now delivered total paralysis. Imprisoned in her own body, she could do nothing. The interrogator smiled at Ellie in a way that made her stomach flip, and the vicious whiteness of the room extinguished as it was absorbed again into the dark. If you enjoy that and want to know more what happens to Ellie, The Dominant, check it out on Amazon. It's on UK, US, right across the board. If you want to know more about the Trusted Thriller series, check out forever-connected.com. If you want a free book, put forever-connected.com/Operation Snowdrop. That's a freebie. And if you fancy that, then you will get a very fast-paced read. Check out the comments and have a fantastic day. Bye for now.